A few days after the closing of the synagogues, David's messengers arrived at Bethsaida with the news that agents of the Sanhedrin were on their way to arrest Jesus. The master made it clear that he was not ready for an open clash with the religious authorities. Neither was he interested in becoming a martyr. He told his apostles to prepare to depart immediately for a preaching tour of the Phoenician cities on the north coast. Accordingly, they left Capernaum in the Sea of Galilee. They traveled north through the territory of Philip, following the canyon of the Jordan River. At the north end of the canyon is the beginning of the marsh country. Ecologists say this was one of the most complex ecosystems anywhere in the Levant at this time. This vast wetlands habitat is fed by the waters of Merom on the west and the Jordan River on the north. It provides resting places for the more than 500 million birds that migrate twice a year between Africa, Asia, and Europe, using the Great Jordan Rift Valley as a flyway around the barrier posed by the Mediterranean Sea. This was a significant turning point in Jesus' public ministry. The work of the kingdom was breaking free from the confines of Hebrew religion. From now on, it would spread and take root in the world of the pagan Gentiles and the Greeks. Slowly working their way up the northern coast, Jesus, the 12, and a group of the evangelists from the Bethsaida training camp spent 6 weeks teaching in the Phoenician cities. Their message was eagerly received by these people. Many Phoenicians responded to the teaching that God is no respecter of persons, races, or nations. Jesus was revealing a new religion to these pagan Gentiles, a religion based solely on cultivating a personal friendship with God, and many of them dared to believe his message. The interest in the city of Tyre was so great that the Melkarth Temple was open to Jesus and his teachers. The enthusiastic reception of their message in the Phoenician cities revitalized the apostles and the evangelists after the discouraging developments in Galilee. 6 weeks into this tour, David's messengers brought word to Jesus that remnants of the believer community in Capernaum and some of the teachers were attempting to reorganize. Within a week, Jesus, the 12, more than 100 believers, the women's corps, the evangelists, and others interested in the establishment of the spiritual kingdom on earth had assembled at Magadan Park. Here, Jesus began the reorganization of his scattered, tested, and depleted forces in preparation for the work of his last year on earth. If the religious authorities were going to make it impossible for him to work in Galilee or Judea, he would build upon the work begun by John the Baptist in Perea and the Decapolis. But in the meantime, Jesus had received a summons to a conference on Mount Hermon to discuss with his celestial associates the rapidly changing context within which he was carrying out his mission on earth. Accordingly, he and the 12 departed immediately for Caesarea Philippi, which was located at the foot of the mountain. Caesarea Philippi was built around a sacred spring in the suburbs of the ancient Israelite center of Dan. Water from the spring feeds the Jordan River. This was Herod Philip's capital, located in a Gentile region far from the influence of Jerusalem temple politics. It was during a conference in the garden of a wealthy Greek convert in Caesarea Philippi that the apostles first acknowledged Jesus as the Son of God in response to his question, "Who say you that I am?" From this point on, Jesus did not hesitate to fully and openly acknowledge his divine nature.
Mount Hermon is a cluster of 3 distinct ridges. Its ancient limestone, broken by faults and erosion, captures melting snow, which emerges in countless springs at the lower elevations. In the heart of the mountain, is a secluded valley with fresh water springs and shelter from the harsh winds that sometimes ravage the higher altitudes. The Sea of Galilee speaks of things organic, a complex ecosystem, and the human communities it supports. But Mount Hermon speaks of things ancient and mythological. It is located in a place where the difference between history and mythology can no longer be distinguished. The presence of the mountain permeates the mythology of the ancient Levant. Gilgamesh takes cedars from its slopes to build his city. In the Book of Enoch, it is the place where the Watchers, the fallen angels of the Lucifer Rebellion, held their meetings. Ruins of the highest temple in the ancient world lie at the summit. Prior to his baptism and full awareness of his universe identity, Jesus had ascended this mountain to meet with Satan, emissary of Lucifer, to conclude certain matters related to Lucifer's rebellion against the universe government. The Master's struggles on the mountain had nothing to do with the kingdoms of this world, but with the sovereignty of an entire universe, a matter forever settled on Mount Hermon by Jesus, the heroic mortal Joshua ben Joseph.
In August of AD 29, Jesus ascended these slopes with 3 of his apostles. He had been summoned to a meeting to discuss repercussions of a more focused planting of his message into the context of Greco-Roman paganism. Jesus had come to release the spiritual potentials in Hebrew religion, which Melchizedek had planted. But centuries of resisting, repeated Gentile incursions had taken its toll. Hebrew religion had been successfully fortified against any further development. And so it was that Peter, James, and John witnessed a conference between Jesus, Gabriel, and Father Melchizedek here on the slopes of Mount Hermon. If his message was to be planted in the world of the pagan Gentiles, it quickly would become buried in mystery and superstition. It would become heavily influenced by the beliefs in the magic power of sacrifice and blood which characterized the religions of the ancient world. The funeral would last for centuries. It would be at least 2 millennia before his resurrection from a tomb of pagan ritual and belief might begin to take place. He would take his message to the Gentiles, but he would continue to do everything possible to establish the Jewish people as torchbearers of the kingdom. And he would force the religious leaders in Jerusalem to make a clear and final choice regarding the part they would play in his mission. By now it was the late summer of AD 29. Abner was sending out teachers from his Bethlehem headquarters to the cities of Judea and Samaria and as far away as the Jewish communities in the Nile Delta. Jesus and the 12 had returned to the camp at Magadan Park. David's messenger service kept these scattered working groups in contact with each other. At Magadan Park, the kingdom aristocracy had gathered and plans were made to begin an extensive mission to the Greek cities of the Decapolis.
In Jesus' time, these Greek cities and the roads connecting them were recovering from the destruction wrought by the Hasmoneans a century earlier. The Romans